Yesterday, President Jacob Zuma filed papers to appeal last month's ruling by the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria, which gave Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa powers to appoint the head of the National Prosecuting Authority instead of the sitting president. The court ruled that the president is conflicted because of the corruption charges against him and therefore cannot make such an appointment. Now, this all came after the court ruled that Shaun Abrahams, the National Director of Public Prosecutions, or NDPP, was appointed unlawfully and must vacate his seat. We are now joined by political analyst Levy Ndou to unpack all of this for us and just to get a little bit of clarity. Good to have you, Levy. Thank you very, very much for being with us here on Morning Live.
Good morning to you, Leanne. Good morning to the viewers of Morning Live.
So, I suppose let's talk about your reaction when you heard the appeal. I mean, it's nothing new for President Jacob Zuma to appeal these rulings. He's done so after most of the rulings, but there's a lot riding on this one. I mean, if the president happens to be found guilty of any of these 783 charges, it would have dire consequences on him. So what was your reaction when you heard the appeal?
Well, first of all, Leanne, I was not surprised. Because firstly, you would know that the Constitution has given specific powers to the state president. And some of those powers relates to the appointment of senior government officials, including the Director of Public Prosecutions. But also on the basis of the fact that it's typical for President Zuma to behave in this manner, I was not surprised. But I think there are a few issues that I think we need to look at. Firstly, I think what he did was to say, as an individual or as the head of state, I'm given these responsibilities to appoint the Director of Public Prosecutions, and that is the argument or the basis of his argument. But also at the other hand, the High Court in Pretoria said, on the basis of the fact that you are conflicted, obviously we cannot give you this responsibility to appoint the Director of Public Prosecutions. It also has its own implications, because it also seeks to suggest that people in the legal fraternity might also take decisions that are actually not in line with their own profession, but that is for the legal people to argue. But specifically on this one, I think on the basis of the fact that President Zuma is conflicted, that is why he is not actually given this responsibility. To note very, very seriously, these responsibilities are not removed from the president, but it is specifically for President Zuma as an individual that is not supposed to appoint the Director of Public Prosecutions on the basis of the fact that he is directly conflicted.
Yeah. You know, we look at the costs associated with all of this, and let's be honest, I mean, the court also ruled that the president should be personally liable for the costs incurred. You know, with this burden hanging over his head, why do you think he still chooses to go this appeal route?
I think there are a few factors that we need to look at. One, for me, would be that I think President Zuma is trying to, at his best, to buy time in order to delay the appointment of the Director of Public Prosecutions so that this matter can actually be resolved at a very, very late stage. But also at the same time, you know, President Zuma has always been in the courts, and he seemed to be very much comfortable in taking matters to court. But lastly, and I think which is very, very important for me, is that the people that are surrounding President Zuma, especially his confidence, don't seem to be providing the best of advices. Because if you have this kind of a situation where President Zuma is filing papers to appeal, for me, he should have discussed this with certain individuals that are very close to him, whom I think would have advised him otherwise. But unfortunately, I think President Zuma is not getting the best of advices.
Yeah. I mean, look, the reality is that the president is within his rights to explore these legal avenues that are available to him. Is there any chance that they could have had a discussion over, given the predicament that could affect their relationship. And I mean, particularly with reference to the president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the relationship going forward between the two of them.
It does affect the relationship, I think, especially when these powers are actually taken from President Zuma, and then these powers are given to the deputy. Obviously, it has a way of affecting negatively the relationship between the two. But also at the same time, one would assume that because we've got President Zuma as the president of the Republic and Cyril Ramaphosa as the deputy president, they would still be in a process of consulting with one another, especially when certain decisions have to be taken. I also think that when President Zuma has to reshuffle his cabinet or take some serious decisions, he also has to consult with the deputy president. And one would expect that also in the same, on the same matter, they might still be in the process of consulting one another, unless if the relationship between the two is actually very sour. And that's why, for me, I don't see the reason why President Zuma has to go further and actually appeal this decision. Because in any way, in South Africa, we believe in the rule of law. The courts have taken a decision, and I think this is in the best interest of the entire population. And that's why my feeling is that it was quite not necessary for President Zuma to have actually appealed this court ruling.
What chances does he really have in this appeal? Because the law actually stipulates, I mean, the law, it's written in black and white with the law, and a lot of people are saying, this is, disrespectful to the law of South Africa for him to go the appeal route, but that's opinions of people. But I mean, if you look, the reality is that what was ruled is that the president has a direct stake as the criminal accused who serves as NDPP. Thus, the law says that the deputy president now has to appoint the NDPP if it is found that the president cannot do so and is not fit to do so. That's in the law. How do you challenge and appeal the law of a country?
I think firstly, Leanne, if you'll recall, the appointment of the Director of Public Prosecutions have been declared unlawful. Number two, the court decision does not remove the powers to appoint the Director of Public Prosecutions from the office of the President. In this case, the view that is very much central and primary is that President Zuma as an individual is conflicted. And I think that is where, that is at the heart of the decision that was taken. And that's why I'm saying that those that are supposed to be advising the president on matters similar to these ones don't seem to be providing the best services to the president. Because indeed, if you are conflicted, you wouldn't then want to participate in that exercise, because you would love to see a situation where there is a fairness and you don't seem to be influencing the outcome of any decision, especially when as an individual are actually conflicted.
Let's move a little bit away from the appeal now to the Lekgotla that is currently underway. I mean, this is the first one after the elective conference that we all watched in December. And eyes are now on the outcomes of this particular weekend. And the NEC again saying that the dismissal or removal of President Jacob Zuma is not on the discussion cards. But I mean, you talk to me. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think the first thing about the Lekgotla would be for the ruling party, which is given the mandate to run the Republic, to develop programs for the organization, and then they'll then be able to translate these programs to the different provinces and regions. And what will then happen is that the discussions of the ANC Lekgotla that is taking place now are the very same discussions that will then be taken to the government Lekgotla, which will then inform the program of government. And that is exactly what we're going to expect to hear at the State of the Nation address. And the finance minister must then be able to allocate resources on the base of this program. So there's a clear build-up from the ANC Lekgotla, government Lekgotla, the State of the Nation address, and the allocation of resources, which will then inform how then the program of the ANC has to fit within the programs of government.
I mean, the issue of President Jacob Zuma being recalled won't go away. I mean, that's all we've been hearing since the new president of the ANC has taken over, that the NEC is meeting. This is it. They're going to recall the president. They're going to recall, and every single time they come out of a meeting, that isn't on the agenda. We're not even speaking about that. Guys, where are you getting this from? So I'm going to ask you, where are we getting this from? I mean, doesn't seem like it's on the cards according to the spokespeople of the ruling party, but what do you think? Is it on the cards?
Leanne, I think people that are raising these kind of issues are raising them on the basis of a number of issues that have actually happened in the past surrounding President Zuma. But I think if you look at the general priorities of the ANC, the removal of the president is not a priority at this stage. But obviously, the expectations of the people on the ground and those that want President Zuma to be removed would actually love to see or hear this discussion taking place within the ANC. But remember, the ANC is actually talking more about unity. Now, the ANC has to be very, very careful when it comes to matters similar to this one. You wouldn't love a situation in which in your first meeting, where you are supposed to deal with serious issues, priorities of government, and the priorities of the ruling party, and then you start by talking about removing President Zuma. But whether we like it or not, the removal of President Zuma will always be in the lips of South Africans on the basis of what has happened in the past, and also the appeal that President Zuma has just made just yesterday. These are some of the issues that makes those who want to see President Zuma being removed from office, they will continue to emphasize that, look now, there has been a court decision taken, now there is an appeal, which in the view of a lot of people is quite unnecessary.
Yeah. All right, we're heading towards the end of the conversation, but you know, as it stands right now, and for people to understand, is that the ANC president, Cyril Ramaphosa, basically addresses ANC lekgotlas. President Jacob Zuma, on the other hand, addresses government lekgotlas. So there's this dynamic of power and the two centers of power, which I know they don't like to talk about, but the reality is there are two different leaders in different capacities that have different styles, different ideas, and different ways about them. You know, how do you honestly think that this can work? I mean, this bringing together unity and to alleviate these two centers of power, is it possible?
Yes, indeed. Leanne, I think it's important to note that there has been an emphasis at the Nasrec conference that the center of power is the ANC. And for me, I think what is very, very important will be the ANC lekgotla, because this ANC lekgotla must then look at the resolutions taken at conference and then identify the priorities of the ANC, which will then, the very same priorities will then be taken to the government lekgotla and then becomes the government programs. What then that means is that the government lekgotla is going to be much easier as compared to the lekgotla of the ANC, because all major decisions are supposed to be taken to at the ANC lekgotla and then taken to the government lekgotla. Now, a lot of people that are in the ANC are also part of the of cabinet and senior government officials. So the very same discussions that will have taken place at the ANC level will then be taken to the government lekgotla for government approval, and then they will form part of the programs of government. So that is how I think it's actually going to work. The ANC must just go and make a presentation to the government lekgotla, and then they should then be adopted as the programs of government.
All right, Levy, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for talking to us here on Morning Live. Levy Ndou, political analyst, talking to us about a range of issues, whether it be the President Jacob Zuma's bid to appeal the Pretoria High Court ruling that Cyril Ramaphosa should appoint the head of the NPA as well as the ANC lekgotla that's currently underway.